I don't know if this is actually true or not, because I have not checked it myself. However, the internet informs me that fasting is mentioned in the Bible over 70 different times. And people who do this kind of scholarly research, or just people who read the Bible on their own as a part of their own spiritual practices, all report that it is looked upon very favorably, for the most part. Meaning the Bible verses that discuss fasting do it in a positive way, as if it's something that you should do as a part of your own lifestyle. But of course, it's like anything else. If you turn it into an idol, it can become something that might be detrimental or might lose a lot of what you would otherwise gain from it if you were engaging in the practice with the correct mindset. And indeed, the man they call Jesus in the Bible is attributed to having said things along those lines. Which is to say, paraphrasing, hey, if you're doing this just to do it, just so you can say, hey, I'm fasting, hey, look at me, look at what I'm doing, look how holy I am, look how amazing I am. If you're doing it for that reason, then you're not truly understanding why people are doing it in the first place. And this is a delicate subject to get into, in spite of the fact that the Bible and other religious traditions have been fasting for thousands of years. It's still a fact that a person who does not eat any food and knows that they will be able to eat again whenever they want calls it fasting. While a person who does not eat food but doesn't know if they will be able to eat again or when that will happen calls it starvation. Even as I speak right now, there are people experiencing starvation on earth. And it seems very arrogant to do a recording talking about fasting in that context. Imagine someone in Gaza right now, for example, hearing this recording, hearing me talking about fasting and the value of it while they starve to death. Because they don't know where the next meal is coming from. That's something you always have to keep in mind when you discuss fasting and this topic. Yes, it has many benefits, both in terms of the health of your body and levels deeper than that. However, it's ultimately a privilege to be able to fast. Yes, of course, we could go back to the hunter-gatherer days and say, well, we're just getting more close to how we evolved to function, where we didn't have easy access to food like we have access to it now. So we generally practiced intermittent fasting. We would go 2-3 days without eating before we ate again. Most of the chronic illness and disease stems from the fact that we eat way too much compared to how we did it back then. But then at the same time, the life expectancy was nowhere close to what it is today. So I think there's a balance there between the blessing of having access to food at all times and the benefits of living how we used to live as hunter-gatherers, or how they told us we used to live in any event. When you fast, you understand how brutal of a way it would be to go out of this world. Starvation is not fun. It's easy to sit there and go through it when you know you're not going to die because you have access to food whenever you want it. but you still experience the feelings as you slowly starve your body and it goes into autophagy, feeding on itself. You can feel that start to happen. You can feel the weakness come over you eventually when you get long enough into one. And I can only imagine the fear and terror that comes over you when you don't know if you're going to be able to eat again, and that weakness and panic sets in as you're realizing that. Anyways, having said all of that, I do want to discuss the power of fasting, but I'm not going to get into it in terms of the health benefits or anything along those lines. And if it's something that you eventually do or want to do for yourself, definitely consult with your doctor and make sure you are monitored through that process if you have medications that you take or you have certain health conditions that are going on. You should have some type of supervision over that process. Especially if you're going to do something crazy like a pure water fast. That's extreme. That's starvation. Standard disclaimer here. Because you are voluntarily starving yourself when you fast, your primal survival instinct becomes very palpable. And essentially, you go to war with your own mind and that survival instinct. It's a battle in your mind. Especially in the beginning, when you're not as experienced with it. I'll never forget the first night that I didn't eat food because I led this blessed life where I never went hungry before. And I was genuinely terrified that first night when I went to sleep because of all the feelings I was having that I had never had before. Am I going to wake up in the morning? I had all of these ideas in my head that were the survival instincts coming through in that moment. Hey, this is not what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to feed ourselves to survive. You're going against that right now. And the first instinct is fear. And I remember feeling that in a very tangible way the first night I went to sleep, having not eaten that day. When you become more experienced doing it, you kind of lose the fear because you know what to expect. I mean, this is why they say we fear what we don't understand. There's so much truth in that. Once you experience something enough, you kind of lose the fear of it, even if it is a scary thing. It's like people who jump out of planes for a living. Most people, myself included, when they went up to that door the first time to jump out of a plane, would soil themselves and be like, I'm not jumping out of this plane. This is terrifying. And the guy who's done it 1,000 times and has all the certifications, it's just another day at the office for him. He's not afraid to jump out of that plane because he knows what to expect. In other words, he knows that he will survive it, even if it's challenging. And it's the same way with fasting. Once you do it enough, you know that you're going to survive it, even when you get into longer periods of time. So that is present in your mind at the same time that you're battling with the survival instinct. Saying all that right away, you can see why the Bible in particular would mention this as a spiritual practice so many times. And this is what I have realized about it. The true power of fasting is that it prepares your mind for the battles that will come when you are not fasting. In this way, it is training. When you fast, and you're hearing that voice in your mind 24/7 the whole time, hey, you should eat. Hey, you have that thing in your refrigerator. I bet that would be good right now. Yeah, you should just do it. Just do it. Just eat it. What are you doing? Why are you not eating right now? Go eat that thing. Ooh, you feel that in your stomach? Ooh, that's the hunger pain, right? Let's go take care of that. It's constant, nonstop, 24/7. Those ideas slipping into your mind. And you're having this constant dialogue with yourself, with your own thoughts. And you very firmly battle with those thoughts that are trying to knock you off of your goal. Meaning, this is practice for other battles that take place in your stream of consciousness. When that which is in control of this world invades your mind to convince you to do whatever thing you can imagine that would go against God's design for you. Fasting is practice as it relates to resisting those invasions. When those thoughts come into your mind and try to corrupt you, you have a lot of practice going back and forth with your thoughts as it relates to, hey, you should eat. No, I'm not going to. Hey, I think you should eat that thing. No, I don't think I will. Hey, here's 10 reasons why I think you should eat right now. Oh, no, I'm going to debunk each and every one of those reasons. And it's really the power of your will in those moments via your thoughts asserting itself. And that is the true power that comes with fasting. It teaches you how to deal with that situation that is going on at all times otherwise. Especially since the invention of technology and media. I'm no biblical scholar. I've never read the Bible cover to cover. It's on my to-do list. At some point I would like to do that. But I would assume, based on my experience with fasting, that the reason it's mentioned so many times in that book, in the context that it is mentioned in, is because of what the practice does as it relates to the spiritual battle that takes place living in this realm. And I use the term battle, but don't take that to mean righteousness. I just mean it in the sense of you have an adversary inside your stream of consciousness attempting to convince you to do a certain thing, and you are interacting with that force in a way where you could perceive it as a battle, but it's more of a fluid thing that doesn't present itself as an adversary. It presents itself as you, as your own voice. It's so interesting how they tell you this in cartoons and get you used to this idea when you're growing up, where they show you the red devil on one side of your shoulder talking into your ear, and then they show you the angel on the other side of your shoulder talking into the other ear. And they're very clearly depicting what is taking place in your stream of consciousness in a way that you can understand it when you're a child. Which is to say, I don't exactly know how productive it would be to view yourself going to war with your own mind. I mean, maybe it would work if that fits your personality. My personality is a little different, and I kind of view the other voice in the way that I would view a comedian. I view it as something that's hilarious. And I just kind of laugh at what it suggests that I should do, or the thoughts that it tries to put into my mind. And I find it funny. I don't know why, but that really helps me keep things into perspective, because sometimes the things that it puts in there are really devious and awful, and it's not funny in any way, but I kind of view it as, oh my gosh, what is so insane about whatever is going on here that thought would actually get put into my mind? How insane is what is going on here? Truly, I don't understand it, because I don't understand how this is happening. In the same way that, going back to the beginning, I don't understand why people are starving in this world. It doesn't make any sense. And there's nothing funny about that, in the same way that there's nothing funny about a lot of the thoughts that are put into my mind. So I suppose it's funny in an absurd way. The absurdity of it is hilarious. It's interesting, though, along the same lines, there's some kind of relationship between the food and the very thoughts that you have, and the influence that things have on your stream of consciousness. At a certain point, when you're not eating food for a long period of time, and by long I mean multiple days, there's a sort of clarity and calmness that comes over you in terms of your thought process, especially as it relates to lust or any kind of sexual thoughts. And this actually makes logical sense, I think, biologically speaking, where when you consume meat, it's kind of a signal to your body, hey, we have access to meat, we're going to survive, we should procreate. And I learned that lesson when I didn't eat meat for a long time, how it kind of muted that impulse, which is why so many quote-unquote spiritual traditions are vegetarian and they abstain from that. It makes you very docile in that way and makes for a very good slave, which is why that would be promoted to especially intelligent people as something that you should do, because it turns you into a very docile individual, which is part of the reason that that diet is being promoted so heavily going forward to the general population. You will own nothing and be happy, and part of the reason that you will be happy is because you will be very docile, and you will have no impulse to revolt from what is being done to you as you eat the bugs, as it were, right? So all of that makes sense biologically speaking. Why that's transpiring when you stop eating not only meat, but all food. You have this calm that comes over you in the sense that you're very content. And part of that is you put so much energy, in modern terms, to gathering the supplies for your meals and preparing your meals, that it's kind of a relief, in a sense, where you don't have to put all that energy into that process anymore. Okay, I'm going to take these few days to not do any of that. Ooh, this is nice. I have all this extra free time. I don't have to worry about any of that. This is very relaxing in that sense. But again, that's only because you know you can eat whenever you want. Which, saying that, I should also say, if you've never fasted before, be very careful how you break your fast, especially if you go 5, 6, 7 days, and anything longer than that. You can't just go right into eating a gigantic meal. You have to be very diligent and patient as you reintroduce things to your body. I actually made that mistake one time early on when I was doing this. And I didn't eat a huge meal right when I broke the fast, but I just got back into my regular routine too quickly. I didn't take enough time. I wasn't patient enough. For whatever reason, that time that I did it, I don't know why, but I ate a full cooked meal that I would have eaten before the fast too soon. And then I was constipated for a couple days in a very painful way because I had put too much food at one time into my stomach and it wasn't prepared to deal with that yet. So it just kind of all went down the filtration system that is your intestines to the point where it's about to exit and there was too much there. And it took a few days for it finally to pass, and it was awful. So that was a hard-learned lesson about patience in the context of fasting that I would pass along to you in case you ever do this. But anyways, you're very content in that sense because you know you aren't going to starve, and you don't have to put energy into making all of your food and everything that goes along with that. But you wouldn't be content if you didn't know where your next meal was going to come from. That content would very quickly turn to fear and panic. Where's my next meal going to come from? And that brings me to another benefit of fasting, which is something that everyone should do, ideally, because if we are ever presented with a situation where the food supply was cut off in some way, intentionally, you wouldn't have so much of a panic going on in your mind if you had gone through 6 to 7 days of not eating food before. You know, hey, I'm not going to die if this happens. I know it's not a good situation, but I at least know how it would feel. And so I wouldn't be panicking in the initial stages. And maybe that would keep everyone a little calmer and people wouldn't be looting and killing each other and going insane in a situation like that if they all had this experience. Knowing that, of course, inevitably it would probably deteriorate along those lines if it wasn't resolved. Or at the very least, there was no hope of it being resolved coming through. Sure, things would most likely deteriorate from the fear of starving, because that fear is very real and you can feel it when it's happening. Which is why everyone has so much anxiety about the future, right? Because we have the economy around us being intentionally turned into something where it's very difficult to survive in it, financially speaking. And the only reason that people do what they do, for the most part, is to put food on the table, as it were, right? To feed their families. And when things get really expensive and people have to go into debt to just do what they were doing before, to feed everyone around them, it triggers that survival instinct. It triggers that anxiety of, oh, wow, am I going to be able to feed myself if things continue in this way? So it's understandable why people have anxiety when they do their artificial booms and busts and manipulate the money supply like they're doing right now. But the problem is people then misplace that anxiety and put it on someone else or something else. And that's where all the mind control comes in, where they have created all of these talking point matrices that give you someone to blame. And more importantly, give you a place to put your anxiety. Hey, I am anxious about the future because of what I'm seeing. Hey, this is potentially threatening my ability to survive. What are we going to do? Nothing seems to be changing. Well, I've heard it's these people's fault over here. I'm going to put my anxiety on them and blame them and get all mad and agitated at them and hate them. But getting back to the lust thing and the biblical fasting angle, that contentment that comes over you when you're not actually starving and you know that your next meal is available is a good place to be in terms of connecting with the signal that is available to that which created us. So I can see why it would be a good context for that kind of communication to take place. If, again, you're doing it for the correct reasons. If you go into it thinking, I am owed something just by doing this, well, nothing's going to happen along those lines because you're not demonstrating the correct humbleness that you are supposed to get out of the experience. There is nothing more humbling than realizing how helpless you are without food. There's nothing more humbling than eating that first thing after a long fast and realizing how lucky you are to be able to just eat. Nothing makes you more humble than taking that first bite of food and thinking, wow, I am the luckiest person on earth right now. That's something that we lose track of when we're just in our daily routine. And when you're in that daily routine where you're eating anything that you want. You never have to think about the possibility of going hungry. Then you shift your priorities and your complaints into a different dimension. You take for granted the fact that you eat every day, and you complain about something else. I don't have enough money. I don't have a relationship that I want. I don't have this physical item that I would like to have. I don't have this. I don't have that. And you forget about the fact that you have a lot already. And that's what fasting does. It brings you back into that reality of how lucky you are to have little things that you take for granted. And that is the spirit in which we should all be approaching God. Meaning it makes perfect sense why fasting would be mentioned so many times in the Bible and encouraged. And that connection is part of why the lust leaves you as well. Because you're so focused on the little things that you're grateful for when they are taken away, that you're not even thinking about any kind of outward energy like that. You're in a pure receiving state because you don't have anything coming into your body, right? There's nothing polluting you in that way. And you're only burning energy. There's nothing coming in. In other words, the energy of lust is a taking energy because it tries to take from someone else. You're trying to latch onto their energy and siphon it. Yes, this has its biological function to encourage procreation. So the man wants to siphon the female's energy in order to emit the seed of life into her. Yes, that's going on. But when that becomes polluted via your disconnection from the humble spirit in which God infused you to be, your taking energy becomes out of balance from what it was designed to be, and then you get what we see all around us in the year 2024 as it relates to the perversion of sexual energy and how your energy as a man or a female, but in particular as a man, that emittance energy is used against us and is used to fuel something else. Something else is feeding on it. When you think about all of the ejaculations that take place on Earth every day, it's an obscene amount. I can't even imagine it. Billions of ejaculations every day. And obviously, when that energy is out of balance, when it is perverted, you lose connection with God. Or at least the signal becomes faint. It's dimmer. It's out of range. However, when you fast and you get back into balance and you're not lusting in that way, the signal becomes clearer. Which again, I think is why fasting is mentioned so many times in the Bible. Knowing that this is the nature of this world and it attempts to pervert us in every way that it possibly can. And in that sense, the power of fasting is that it prepares your stream of consciousness for the reality of your everyday life and what your mind will experience. It prepares you to deal with those intrusive thoughts that try to knock you off balance, that try to pervert you or corrupt you in some way. Not just sexually, but in any way you can imagine. It's all the same thing. It's a derivation of the same energy that does this. But it's like Satan doesn't care how it chains you up. It just hands you a piece of a chain, and you chain yourself up. There are so many different chain links that you could focus on, meaning I don't mean to imply that the perversion of our sexual energy is the only one. that you should be paying attention to. No, of course not. It's just the one that's the most pervasive because every single person has experience with it and is subjected to it. Where that which is in control here gets people out of balance to the point where the male tries to take and siphon the female energy just to emit for a feeling. And the female attaches to the male and tries to siphon his energy for the feeling of it, to get the high of the chemical reactions that take place with an orgasm, where it's a drug and there's nothing deeper there and there's no purpose to it other than producing the energy for something else to use it for itself. And you guys really have to think about this. Go read up on what Aleister Crowley did as it relates to sexual rituals. Go read up on what they did as far as the quote-unquote magic they were attempting to conduct via orgasms. If someone like that knew those things, do you think that which is in control here knows about it too and has been employing it from the very beginning? It creates through that energy that you are just giving away. And I struggle with it just as much as everyone else. And it's not until I go to those places where it's removed that I realize just how big of a hold it has on me. Even if I'm more advanced with it than 99% of the population, it still has a hold on me. It's still in my stream of consciousness all the time. It's just I have the practice of dealing with those thoughts. And bigger than that, I just know it's going on. I mean, that's the hack of all hacks, right? You got to know it's happening in the first place to deal with it. If you don't know that there's something else in your mind influencing your thoughts, you don't stand a chance in the first place. So that's number one. And that is the true power of fasting, is dealing with your stream of consciousness when it is trying to convince you to eat in a desperate way is great practice for how it is taking place in all other areas of your life, in all other areas of your stream of consciousness as it relates to your thoughts. And the way that voice is metaphorically on your shoulder, speaking those thoughts into your mind, trying to convince you to do something that you should not do. Obviously, the way I am presenting this information, I am influencing you potentially to want to fast. So I won't pretend like I'm not doing that. Yes, I think this is something that everyone should do. However, it's like anything else that relates to your health. You can hurt yourself doing this type of stuff. You can damage your body doing this type of stuff if you jump into it and don't know what you're doing. And it's just the nature of this place where some people are like that. I'm kind of like that too. I jump into things sometimes before I'm ready, even though I think I've done the research on it. There's just certain things that you get into too quickly without knowing enough about it. So really, I'm speaking to people like that when I give this disclaimer. You really have to research this stuff. Not just fasting, anything that's health related. You got to deep dive into it. From both the perspective of what they're telling you on YouTube or any other alternative platform where they're potentially going against the allopathic medical system. And then you have to deep dive into the allopathic medical system and understand what actual doctors and scientists say about this stuff to the best of your ability. Because as much as the alternative side wants to tell you that allopathic side doesn't know anything, that is not true, okay? They are right about certain things that the other side is wrong about, and vice versa. Which is to say, don't be so arrogant to think that you have it all figured out because you found the truth on YouTube. This stuff can be dangerous just as much as it can be beneficial. It can produce miracles just as much as it can produce tragedies. I've seen the tragedies with my own eyes, okay? Given what I have experienced, I do not take this warning lightly, and I don't take the responsibility lightly of promoting something like fasting, okay? You have to remember, at a certain point in the fast, your body is consuming itself. And that has its benefits as it relates to getting rid of some stuff in there that shouldn't be there, as it's burned to fuel your body. But that can also have downsides. And just put into my own words, via my own experience, 2,000 years later, it seems clear to me that the true purpose of fasting and the true power of it is to train your stream of consciousness to deal with the reality of what's going on in this world, whatever it is, where we are constantly 24/7 subjected to something that is trying to turn our stream of consciousness into something else. It's injecting thoughts into our mind in a way that it is trying to corrupt us all the time, all day, every day. And fasting helps train your stream of consciousness to deal with that situation. And it humbles you in a way that nothing else can. It brings you back into balance with the way that you were designed to be originally, and you begin to appreciate the things that you had completely lost track of appreciating. And it resets everything. It recalibrates you. It makes things very clear, especially as it relates to those things that you were complaining about before you did it. Because, hey, as it turns out, I'm pretty lucky just to be able to eat food. No one should be starving to death on planet Earth.